the short delay. It was requested that I delay Health Committee because they're paying a tribute to the former Governor General LeBlanc. Monsieur Malot has requested that we start because we have a lot of business to do. So thank you for that request. Now that you've made it, I can do it. So thank you very much. Now today we have a very interesting presentation. We have, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, a briefing on airline policy to allow small pets on passenger cabins. And so we will have a 5-minute presentation from each of the witnesses, and following that, we will have a 7-minute question and answer. Now, I have to tell you that someone else will be taking the chair shortly, because I am required to go back into the House and deliver a speech very soon, but I will return after that speech. So it's going to be kind of a busy day today, kind of like a skateboard. Now we have Diane Bergeron. She's a guide dog user. We have Allergy Asthma Information Association, Mary Ellen, Chief Executive Officer. We have Canadian Lung Association, Jennifer Schenkel, Director of Communications. And we have a video conference with Jill Frigon, a registered nurse from Health Initiatives Coordinator. She's the Health Initiatives Coordinator for the Canadian Lung Association. And we have Dr. Robert Schellenberg, Head Division of Allergy and Immunology, Department of Medicine, University of British Columbia, from the Canadian Thoracic Society, and Thomas Kovsky, Pediatric Respirologist, Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. And from the Canadian Transportation Agency, we have Joan MacDonald, Director General of the Dispute Resolution Branch, and Mary Jane Gravel. Where's Mary Jane? Over there. Hi, Mary Jane. Director, Accessible Transportation Directorate. So I want to thank you very much for being here today, and I want to thank you for your patience. And we will begin right now with Diane Bergeron as the guide dog user. So Diane, could you please begin? 5 minutes.
Thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to come and talk to you for a few minutes today. I just wanted to come to make sure that people understood the differences between a guide or service dog and a pet, and to differentiate those when looking at rules, regulation, and legislation. A guide or service dog is specially trained, usually by an organization of specialized trainers and qualified trainers, to mitigate a disability and to ensure the safety of the individual that they are protecting because of their disability. It also enhances their independence and allows them to be more free to do the things that they want to do and give them a higher quality of life. When I was first thinking about this topic, I found this quite ironic that I was having the opportunity to come and talk about this, because a year ago I tried to get my dog in the cabin of a plane and was refused because I was going to London and had a 3-month issue where I couldn't convince the organization, the agency, that my dog should be in the cabin, and finally it did happen. So I think it's kind of ironic that I'm here today to talk about not having pets in the cabin of a plane. Dogs that are trained as guide or service dogs are trained very well. They usually take between $30,000 to $60,000 to train and get qualified. The people that are the handlers are also trained. We go to special schools to train with our animals. So there's a big process and a heavy-duty process to go through to have and work a service or guide animal. One of the things that we learn is to handle the dog in any situation. The dog is naturally and has a natural instinct to be distracted by other animals and to want to go and interact with other animals. They are trained to work through that process, but there's still an instinct, and you can't train the instinct out of them. You just train them to go and work through it. Having pets on an aircraft in the cabin is a distractor for guide and service dogs. And I have been on a plane where there has been a cat right next to me, although my dog wasn't near as stressed as the cat was. But there was still some distractions there. And in a situation where there may be an emergency evacuation, that may be difficult for a guide or service dog to maintain their attention. My main purpose for being here is to make sure that people understand that guide dogs and service dogs are there for a reason and should be exempted from any regulation refusing to allow pets inside the cabin. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. What I'm going to have to do now is go into the House of Commons, so I'm asking one of our vice chairs, Ms. Julie Washley-Solis, to take over for just a few moments, and I will be back after my speech, and we'll continue on. Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Washley-Solis, I'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The pertinent part of that statement was that it was only for a few minutes, so I could ask lots of questions, right? So now we go to Mary Ellen, Chief Executive Officer with the Asthma Information Association.
Thank you. I'll start by just saying a bit about allergy. It's believed that about 30% of Canadians are allergic in one way or another, and although I don't think we have exact figures, maybe 10% of those are allergic to pets in varying degrees. And it tends to be pet dander and saliva that cause problems, and the pet dander can float in the air. It's light, people breathe it in, and it can lead to symptoms in their nose, eyes or lungs if they have asthma. And it's, I think, admittedly difficult to predict in advance the seriousness of a reaction because it can really vary from person to person and even within the same person at different times. And there can be coexisting factors that occur, whether they're reacting to other allergies, other triggers, have a cold or so on. People who do avoid pets tend to believe that the policy of allowing them in the cabin restricts their mobility rights and imposes undue obstacles for them when they're traveling. And I think I'll just run through some of the concerns that we have heard. They fear having a reaction in the air where they can't leave the premises, where they're stuck on the plane, and where they may not be able to get medical help if it's needed. They're also uncertain as to what to expect in advance. They don't know when they leave whether or not they're going to unexpectedly have a little pet sitting next to them. Some of them have said that when they do fly, when there is a pet seated next to them, their request to change seats is not honored. They're not able to get an alternative spot on the plane. And they know that after the pets leave the planes, a lot of the allergen may stay behind even if the seat is cleaned properly. And even if they are able to find out in advance that a pet's on board, it would be a big inconvenience to them to be able to have to change seats or change flights and pay penalties and so on. And they're also aware that even if they don't react on the flight, there can be delayed reactions. They could have symptoms 4 to 12 hours later. And I think not knowing in advance, they don't know whether they need to adjust their medications before they come on board. And some people have raised the fact that even flight attendants and other airline employees could also be infected if they were asthmatic. Now, they would clearly prefer to have a pet-free environment on planes. If that is not to be, I mean, that is what we are advocating for, but if that's, with the exception, of course, of service dogs, but if they were to be there, then they would certainly like to be able to find out in advance of the flight that a pet is on that flight. They'd like other procedures that reduce risk and improve communication, possibly confining the pets to one area at the back of the plane, the right to change seats. They want airlines to improve the cleaning processes, perhaps switch to leather seats. They would like the right to cancel and rebook without penalty, or a mechanism even where they can register their allergies in advance, and perhaps then after that point pets wouldn't be accepted on the flight. I know it's a difficult issue because there are animal lovers and people that are allergic to them, and sometimes one and the same, and it's not an easy topic on which to get consensus from everyone. But these are the main points that I have heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next presenter is the video conference with
Frigo.
Jill Frigon, Canadian Lung Association. Can you hear us, Jill?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jill Frigon. I'm a Health Initiative Coordinator with the Lung Association of Saskatchewan and a registered nurse. So I'm here today to represent the many patients that I work with every day who have severe pet allergies, asthma, and various other respiratory diseases. But I'm not only here as a healthcare professional, but also as a patient. I myself have asthma and have lived with asthma my entire life. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here presenting to you by video conference down the street from you all, simply because I could not be in the same room as an animal, just simply because I would have an asthma attack myself. So asthma is a chronic lung disease that causes the airways to become inflamed, making it very difficult to breathe. Asthma is the leading cause for one of the leading causes for children to be hospitalized, and the most common chronic disease among children. So asthma attacks can be brought on by exposures to pets and can lead to episodes of extreme breathlessness. And asthma attacks require treatment immediately and often medical attention. And asthma attacks can, in fact, be life-threatening. So pets are a common trigger to asthma, and they can cause flare-ups and asthma attacks. When I myself am exposed to a dog or cat and or their dander, I experience an asthma attack. So just to give you an example of what that looks like, in addition to sneezing, coughing, watering eyes, my chest becomes very, very tight, and it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest, and I struggle to breathe. So with that, I am forced to increase my medications as my airways have become inflamed, constricted, and narrowed. But after the initial attack and after taking my medications, it's important to point out that I won't feel healthy again for weeks later, as the inflammatory process is actually quite longer than just the initial attack. With that, I'm often so ill I have to miss work, and I'm unable to provide for my family, and as well, I'm unable to care for my patients, which is really important. So much of the first 10 years of my life, I lived in the hospital, and that was because of my asthma. At the age of 3, I was exposed to a family friend's cat, and as a result, I ended up staying for several days in the intensive care unit at the Regina General Hospital, just to give you a picture of how severe asthma can really be. And over the years, I have developed a much better understanding on how to manage my asthma, for sure. And I want to point out that the research is very clear. People with asthma need to avoid their triggers, in addition to taking their medications and lifestyle interventions, and one of these triggers is often pets. So the consequences of being exposed to triggers such as pets vary. So the spectrum is rather broad. There are people that can have mild reactions, just watery eyes, sneezing, coughing, and also people can go on the other end of the spectrum and experience severe breathlessness, which can be life-threatening for sure. So I work very hard to keep myself healthy and in good physical fitness, and I avoid my triggers at all costs, just so I can do the things I love to do. I'm training for a half marathon, I'm a dancer in a dance company, and I teach fitness classes on the side on a regular basis when my asthma is under control. In my career, I have studied in the fields of kinesiology, adapted physical activity, working with people with disabilities, which led me to nursing. So I have seen firsthand just how a disability can really affect one's quality of life, and I do not wish to feel disabled because of my asthma. Today I represent the many patients and families and their loved ones that I care for, and they all wish to travel safely. I'm asking you today not to put corporate needs ahead of the public's health and ahead of mine. I flew with Air Canada from Saskatchewan to be here to speak with you today. If a dog or cat had been on my flight, I would not have this opportunity to speak with you and to share my story and to represent my patients. I would simply be too ill and too short of breath to speak. So please consider the Lung Association's request today. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Jill. And now we'll go to the Canadian Thoracic Society and hear from Thomas Kovesi, pediatric respirologist, Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of the Canadian Thoracic Society and CHEO, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, to speak on this important issue. I'm a pediatric respirologist, or a children's lung specialist, an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Ottawa, and a senior author of the Canadian Pediatric Asthma Consensus Guidelines. I'm recognized nationally for my research on air quality and respiratory health in Inuit children, and I should admit that I'm currently redeployed as a physician at the CHEO Emergency Treatment Unit for H1N1. Madam Chair, I want to outline for the committee today the issue of air circulation in an airplane passenger cabin and why that may present a problem for those with asthma and or pet allergies. As committee members have already heard, the main allergen that cats produce that people get allergic to is stored in their skin and fur, and this is often referred to as dander. The allergen is often present in very tiny particles that can remain suspended in the air for extended periods of time. Modern commercial airliners provide about 15 to 20 air changes per hour, which compares very favorably to a typical level of about 12 air changes per hour in a room such as an office building or the room we're in currently, or about 5 changes per hour in your house. In addition, airliners have sophisticated HEPA filters for filtering out small particles, including allergens and microorganisms. However, the situation is not as simple as this for 2 reasons: ventilation patterns and the use of upholstered seating. Madam Vice Chair, let's look at both of these issues one at a time. In terms of airliner air ventilation and circulation, air normally enters near the cabin ceiling, circulates around the cabin, and exits near the cabin floor. Less air moves along the length of the inside of the cabin. Research has shown that cabin airflow patterns do not entirely eliminate the risk that airborne bacteria will travel from one section to another. In any enclosed space, patterns of air circulation can occur, and these can be very difficult to predict. For this reason, infections with tuberculosis and SARS, for example, have occurred on commercial flights, despite the sophisticated ventilation systems and HEPA filters, particularly among passengers a few seats over. That's why in 1998, Air Canada banned serving air peanuts aboard their flight. It's impossible to predict the possibility that allergens will travel from one part of an airplane to another. Before Air Canada banned peanuts from being served on planes, I had one patient with peanut anaphylaxis who nearly died on a flight from London, England to Ottawa after being exposed to the odors from other people eating peanuts. Life-threatening reactions to nuts have been reported on commercial airliners by Comstock and co-workers in California. He reported 2 patients with severe life-threatening reactions, including one requiring diversion of the airplane, and a total of 6 who had to visit emergency departments after their flights. Over 60% of these reactions were caused by inhalation of the allergens. Madam Chair, the second issue we need to consider is the cloth upholstery used in most airplane seats. Numerous studies have shown that pet owners can transmit pet allergens from their clothes to carpets and upholstered furniture in other locations, such as schools. As well, allergens deposited on these surfaces can cause allergies and asthma in people who are exposed to these surfaces who have the relevant allergies. A study by Martin and co-workers in New Zealand has already shown increased concentrations of cat allergen on commercial aircraft seats. In that study, 100% of the seats on commercial domestic flights and 14% on commercial international flights contained clinically significant levels of cat allergen. A study by Kustovich and co-workers showed that the amount of cat allergen present in upholstered furniture in the homes of people who have cats is 300 times higher than on the upholstered furniture of people who don't have cats. Thus, The amount of allergen deposited on aircraft seats is going to be vastly higher if that pet is present on board the plane than if only the owner is present on the plane. While both Air Canada and WestJet have proposed moving people with animal allergies away from pets on airplanes, there are no proposed plans to ensure that people with pet allergies don't sit on a seat that was just occupied by a pet or recently occupied by a pet. In addition, seating people with animal allergies away from animals on board may be impractical, given that families may want to stay together and given how crowded most airline flights are. Madam Vice Chair, the issue isn't just one of allergic reactions and asthma attacks, but where these events would potentially be taking place. As you can imagine, having an asthma reaction here in Centre Block would not be a good thing, but it would be a vastly worse thing if it was happening at 40,000 feet, especially if it's over water, where even an aircraft diversion is going to take time. People with allergies and asthma can and do have life-threatening asthma attacks, and the risk of having one on an airplane outweighs the purported commercial benefits to the airline of allowing people to bring their pets on board. There may also be a cost for the airline due to flight diversions. In 2005, the province of Ontario banned smoking in public places. At the time, the Ontario Medical Association noted that having a non-smoking section in a restaurant, to be a little crude, is like having a non-peeing section in a swimming pool. From a commercial or from a medical perspective, maintaining a ban on pets on board Air Canada flights makes as much, if not more, sense than banning smoking in restaurants and voiding in swimming pools. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to go back to Robert Schellenberg, also with the Canadian Thoracic Society. He is the head of the Division of Allergy and Immunology, Department of Medicine, University of British Columbia. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to be here with the Canadian Lung Association and my colleague, Dr. Kavesi. I'm an allergist who personally doesn't have allergies and who's owned both cats and dogs, some of which have traveled with me on planes, but safely in the cargo hold. With these pressurized areas guaranteeing safe transport of animals, my question to committee members, and in fact to the airlines, is why should we jeopardize the health and safety of humans by allowing pets in the main cabins of planes? As committee members may know, and as Mary Ellen has already pointed out, the prevalence of animal allergy in our general population is high, with estimates suggesting 10% of individuals are allergic to cats and 5% to dogs. With such a high incidence, the likelihood of someone having an allergic reaction to cats and dogs on any large commercial airlines, or at least having exposure, is close to 100%, and certainly a significant risk of reactions. As a physician, I must say that many of my patients have raised the issue of allowing pets on planes and expressed their concern of the matter. One of these patients, who's allergic to cats, had cat exposure on a recent flight to Ottawa to receive a national award for her contributions to science. This flare of her severe asthma forced her to stay an additional 3 days in Ottawa for medical attention and prevented her from carrying on to Boston to visit her grandchildren, which she was looking forward to. She's now very reluctant to get on any airplane. Another young woman who's highly allergic to cats contacted me from the UK regarding her return flight. She was just being released from hospital for a 1-week stay because of her asthma. Needless to say, both she and I were very worried that she might have an acute exacerbation if she had cat exposure on the flight. Managing this somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean would be a nightmare. Although some pet allergic individuals will have only eye and nose symptoms with exposure, cat and dog allergens are major triggers of severe asthma attacks in others. These can be life-threatening, as Jill has told you. And a single exposure, even treated aggressively, can lead to persistent symptoms for days. The greatest risk of reaction is to those sitting nearby an animal and those who cannot avoid exposure. This would include flight attendants who suffer from allergies to animals. All allergists and respirologists have numerous patients who develop severe asthma when exposed to cats and dogs. With the vast distances between our cities and our country, Everyone should have the right to safe air travel. The alternative modes of transportation for many of us are simply impractical, as would have been mine coming from Vancouver yesterday. An additional concern raised by many with whom I speak is hygiene. Do you really want to sit next to a cat or dog? I don't, and I must admit, I also prefer not to have to spend my flight attending to someone with a severe asthma attack. If breeders of cats and dogs ship their highly prized animals in the cargo hold of planes, surely this is appropriate for individuals with a single pet. Why should a small minority of individuals jeopardize the comfort and health of a much larger population who have the misfortune of being allergic to pets? Safe air travel entails more than appropriate maintenance of aircraft. Ensuing such for all Canadians requires legislation or regulations restricting pets from the cabins of aircraft. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And we'll now go to the Canadian Lung Association with Jennifer Schenkel.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, on behalf of the Canadian Lung Association, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to address our concern about the decision by Canada's airlines to allow pets to travel in the passenger cabins of airplanes. At the outset, let me thank you, Madam Chair, and Vice Chairs, Ms. Washalisha Lease and Ms. Murray, for being so attentive to this issue, and all committee members for agreeing to today's meeting. I want to take a moment to explain how the Lung Association became aware of the problem of pets in passenger airplane cabins. In May 2008, a Lung Association volunteer with severe allergies to pets attempted to board a WestJet flight departing from St. John's. At the last minute, he noticed a passenger with a cat carrier standing in line behind him, about to get on the plane. As he was fearful that he might have a severe allergic reaction to the cat while mid-flight, the volunteer asked to be placed on a different flight. Unfortunately, he was refused. He subsequently bought a ticket with Air Canada, which at that point did not allow pets to travel in the cabin. Based on this experience by one of our volunteers, the Lung Association contacted WestJet to clarify their policy in regard to animals on board planes. We learned that WestJet allows up to 2 dogs, cats, birds, or rabbits to travel in the passenger cabin on every flight, and they do not let passengers know which flights will include pets. To ensure a safe trip for allergic passengers, we asked WestJet to consider offering pet-free flights. WestJet indicated that they were not willing to change existing policies, instead preferring to seat people with lung disease and allergies several rows apart from any animals. In July 2009, Air Canada began to allow pets in airplane cabins as well, something it had not previously allowed. As we had done with WestJet, the Lung Association wrote to Air Canada's President and CEO requesting that the airline consider our recommendation to make air travel safer for people with pet allergies. Like WestJet, Air Canada rejected our recommendations, speaking of their desire to be pet-friendly. Given that both major national airlines now permitted pets in the passenger cabin, and knowing that this put at risk a large number of Canadians with lung disease, the Lung Association felt compelled to take this issue to the Canadian public. In late June 2009, we commissioned 4 questions in an Angus Reid omnibus poll, asking Canadians to let us know their feelings on the issue, the results of which I'm happy to table with the committee. 80% of Canadians stated that they wanted Canada's airlines to offer pet-free flights, and 75% of Canadians said they felt the federal government had a responsibility to act on this issue in the interest of protecting passengers and crew members who have asthma and severe pet allergies. We then conducted a national web-based advocacy campaign. This was advertised only through word of mouth and earned media. In the 12 weeks of the campaign, nearly 3,000 Canadians came to our website to send letters to members of the Health Committee and to the CEOs of Air Canada and WestJet to call for hearings on the issue of pets on planes. We were impressed at the large number of Canadians who expressed concern about this issue and who urged airlines and government to protect them and their family members from the possibility of a serious allergic reaction mid-flight. The Lung Association is extremely concerned about the health of airline passengers and crew who may suffer from severe allergies to pets. I do wish to highlight that prior to this meeting today, the Lung Association spoke with a representative from WestJet who informed us that in the last 18 months, 25% of their flights had a pet on board the airplane. This number excludes service animals, and that the average number of animals per flight was 1.2. We're conscious that any solution we propose will not be perfect, but the association is committed to a compromise that serves to reduce the risks presented to those with asthma or pet allergies that could be exacerbated by exposure to an animal. Our recommendation to your committee is that you ask the airlines to ban pets in the passenger cabins of airplanes. People with lung disease should not be prevented from traveling by aircraft. At the same time, we do not want to see people with other disabilities who require service animals to be denied access to an aircraft. As such, we recommend that on flights where a service animal is present, that passengers be informed in advance and given the option of either staying on board the flight or being moved to the next available flight at the airline's cost. Although this compromise is not perfect, it will greatly reduce exposure to pet allergens and the risk of asthma episodes. We believe that in an age where Canadians can pre-select their meals, their seats, and numerous other options associated with travel, existing information systems can easily accommodate requests from people with pet allergies to be booked on a flight with no pets in the cabin. Many people love pets. Indeed, many members of the Lung Association are also pet owners. This is not about trying to deny people the privilege of traveling with their pets. Rather, this is about finding an important middle ground that balances the love of our pets with the health and safety of airline passengers and crew who are at risk due to their allergies and asthma. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we will go to the Canadian Transportation Agency with Joan MacDonald, Director General.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Joan MacDonald, the Director General of Dispute Resolution at the Canadian Transportation Agency, and my colleague Mary Jane Gravel is our Director of Accessible Transportation at the agency. Just very briefly, the Canadian Transportation Agency is a federal administrative tribunal whose jurisdiction covers a wide range of economic matters affecting air, rail, and marine modes, and includes accessible transportation for persons with disabilities. Its role is to provide effective dispute resolution and economic regulation through its mandate that is set out in the Canada Transportation Act. À titre de tribunal administratif indépendant,
as an independent administrative tribunal, the agency has the powers of a court and can make binding decisions.
The agency's 5 full-time members who are appointed by the Governor and Council and are supported in their work by the 260 staff of the agency. Just before I go any further, I would like to underline that my observations today do not apply to service animals, such as guide dogs for blind persons, which are not considered pets, obviously. Canadian carriers operating larger-size aircraft in Canada are required by agency regulation to carry these service animals in the cabin. Avant d'aborder le sujet des plaintes sur l'accessibilité,
before dealing with the whole issue of complaints regarding the accessibility of pets, I would like to briefly raise the issue of airline tariffs.
The passengers and the airline. And carriers are generally free to set those terms and conditions contained in them, provided that they are clear, just, and reasonable. Tariffs can cover a wide variety of matters, including whether or not pets can be carried in the cabin, or in the cargo hold, or in the baggage compartment. Today, most of our pet-related tariff cases the agency has handled involve the carriage of pets in airplane baggage compartments. But one tariff case was about allowing a pet in the aircraft cabin, which the carrier's tariff at that time did not allow. L'Office a également été saisi des...
The office has also received several complaints with respect to accessibility that have been filed by air travelers who are allergic to animals.
Per se, its enabling statute does provide it with the power to remove what we call undue obstacles to the mobility of persons with disabilities. And the agency does this through various means, through codes, voluntary codes of practice, through regulations, binding decisions on individual complaints, and ordering corrective measures to remove barriers to travel. And the one complex, well, out of many, but one complex question the agency has had to answer is whether allergy is a disability for the purposes of the Canada Transportation Act. And the agency has ruled that an allergy per se is not a disability, but that there may be people with allergies who may be considered as having a disability under the Act. So what we do is we examine each allergy-related complaint on a case-by-case basis using the World Health Organization model of disability to determine if a health impairment affects the person's ability to travel. And if it is in the affirmative, the agency then examines whether the person experienced an obstacle, and if so, was it undue, and then corrective measures can be taken. At present, we have 8 active allergy-related cases involving Air Canada and WestJet. 4 of these involve allergies to animals in the aircraft cabins. To assist the agency in its understanding of allergies, it has hired a doctor who is an allergy specialist to prepare a report for us, and it also includes a component related to allergies related to dog and cat to allergens. Now, regarding these specific pet allergy complaints, as the cases are currently being formally adjudicated before the agency, I can only speak to the process that we are following. À l'heure actuelle, l'Office est en recevoir les plaidoiries.
Right now, the agency is receiving written complaints from complainants and airlines. Medical documents are also part of the submissions that were submitted by the complainants.
The agency then will be in a position to weigh all the evidence and decide on the next course of action, which could include decisions on the disability status, the obstacles and their undueness, and possible corrective measures. J'espère que c'est bref.
I sincerely hope that this brief overview will answer some of your questions about the role of the agencies when it comes to the concerns of people with allergies who travel by plane.
His presentation to the Standing Committee on Health, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And we'll now start. We'll have a 7-minute question and answer. Can you hear me? If you do you have an earphone there if you need it. We'll have 7 minutes.
The corner, but I think I can hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have 7 minutes question and answer, and we'll start with Madame Mendez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm not a usual member of this committee, so excuse my ignorance on the depth of the matter. I would like to know from Ms. McDonald, please, are there other international airlines that have this kind of policy already developed? Do you know? Are you aware of any?
There's a variety of different policies as to whether or not carriers allow them. It really depends on the airline. Some do, some don't. Some restrict the number. Some will not even allow it in baggage. So it really does vary. I would submit that probably the more do than don't, though.
That allow
yes.
than they don't. And why would they vary?
Well, in Canada particularly, carriers are free to set those terms and conditions of carriage, subject to them being just and reasonable. So occasionally we will receive complaints from air travelers saying a particular tariff condition is not reasonable, and the agency will hear that complaint.
Okay.
And then on the accessibility side, we will hear complaints from persons with disabilities who will encounter problems while traveling, and we will hear those as well.
Those that have allergies, I imagine.
Well, that's where we get into the determination of whether a person who has an allergy is a person with a disability for the purposes of our Act and applying the legislation.
Because I just find it very difficult to understand. I imagine somebody who's traveling with a pet is because that person is going for an extended period of time and needs to carry the pet with them to wherever they're going. And if they can't transport them either by cargo or by baggage or with them on the cabin, how are they going to transport the animal? Whereas I think bus transportation and train transportation allows for pets, as far as I know.
Well, there's various options for an air traveler. If, for example, the airline does not allow pets in the cabin, it may allow pets in the baggage compartment. For those airlines that don't, if sometimes there are just strictly cargo carriers, so an individual could always ship their animal on a cargo carrier or find another airline.
What happens with other transportation means, such as trains and buses?
That possibly might be an option for them as well, but I'm not really that familiar with that trains will accept pets as cargo. Or are you talking about somebody traveling with a pet on a train?
With pets, yeah.
Gee, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I could try and find out, but what Via Rail's policies are vis-a-vis pets.
Well, I will pass on my time to other colleagues. I don't have enough preparation to deal with more questions on this, so thank you very much.
Monsieur Malo.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'd like to understand something, Mrs. McDonald. You determine whether or not asthma or the allergy constitutes a disability following the reception of a complaint from a passenger. Is that correct? Yes. If I may, I would prefer to answer in English. Okay, I just want to clarify my question. In that case, so the complainant has had to have an incident on board before you will be able to determine whether yes or no there has been a violation. Is that correct? No, that's not necessary. You don't have to necessarily come up against an obstacle, but you can table or file a complaint. For example, the agency has dealt with complaints where a person was getting ready to make a trip and wanted to understand the carrier's policies and decided that it would be a problem and therefore filed a complaint without actually experiencing an incident. So if I understand correctly, from your point of view, we don't really need a comprehensive policy, but you can look at this on a case-by-case basis to determine whether a passenger is entitled to travel in the same plane as another passenger with a pet.
And you could have somebody who could have a very minimal reaction to a particular allergen. It's very difficult to come out with a blanket resolution that would cover that wide spectrum of allergies. So instead, the agency looks at it on a case-by-case basis to see indeed what is the impairment for the person, and what does that allergy translate into as an impairment, and what is the situation, what is the activity or the participation restriction of that individual as they travel in the
Est-ce que ça veut dire que lorsque, par exemple, vous déterminez...
Does that mean that when you determine that an individual suffers from allergy or an asthma, cannot travel with an animal, so this person has to call the carrier and say, okay, this person is going to this and this place on such and such plane. Could you please ensure that on this particular date there won't be any pets on board or any animals on board? Is that what you do when you assess that for a given individual there is a problem traveling with animals? I'm not sure if I really understood your question well.
Now is 4 complaints from persons who have allergies vis-a-vis the situation of pets in cabins, and that's currently what the agency is looking at right now and is getting evidence to weigh that, and it will make a ruling on the situation at one point once it finishes hearing all the evidence.
Donc, ça va être une politique globale. Ce ne sera pas basé sur le cas par cas.
Well, it will be a comprehensive policy, not a case-by-case process.
WestJet. Those are our 2 primary air carriers in Canada. They cover approximately 90% of the domestic traffic in Canada. So when the agency makes its decision, it will cover a lot of that domestic travel.
Parfait. Madame Bergeron.
Ms. Bergeron, could you tell me whether right now do you take your guide dog with you when you travel by plane? My French is not all that great, and I'm not getting the translation.
Est-ce que vous pouvez me demander?
Could you please repeat the question? Have you got your little interpretation device in your ear?
I'm sorry.
Parfait.
Right now, do you travel with your guide dog when you take the plane? And I'm asking you this. I'm asking this question of the other panelists. So Mrs. Bergeron should continue to be able to travel with her guide dog because she needs it in order to move around. Should she continue having this?
Oui, allez-y, Madame Allen.
Please go ahead, Mrs. Allen.
But if the allergic person knows in advance that the dog will be there, then they can make alternative arrangements. I think that's what we're suggesting. We would not deny ever the service dog's right to be there.
Donc, il va falloir une plus grande coordination de la part des...
So we need better coordination amongst the carriers to ensure that in the same plane you won't find a person who needs a service dog to get around and people who are really asthmatic or allergic to the animals. That's it.
D'après vous, Madame McDonald, c'est quelque chose...
Mrs. McDonald, is that something that would be possible for your agency?
Possible measures that can be taken. At this point, it would be premature for me to speculate what decision the agency might come up with.
Et cette décision-là, elle sera disponible quand? Est-ce que vous avez une idée de...
Do you know when this ruling is going to come down?
We're in the process of receiving les plaidoiries from the applicants and from the carriers. So there's a process where the evidence is exchanged and comments are provided by both parties. In this case, we have two carriers, so multiple parties.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you.
Before we go on, did you hear me, Jill?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Would you like to comment on any of the questions asked so far?
Well, I think that just with the last remark there, with allowing service dogs on the aircrafts, myself having studied, having a degree with adaptive physical activity, working with people with disabilities, absolutely, it is a need. And I think a lot of it has to do with risk reduction. So Jennifer Schenkel from the Lung Association also pointed out that WestJet, 25% of their flights have cats or dogs on them that are not service animals. And I think that just minimizing that amount is significant in itself. And so we're not suggesting that service dogs in any way, shape, or form should not be allowed on the aircraft, but rather risk reduction would benefit greatly for people like myself. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Jill. And now we'll go to Pat Davidson with the Conservatives.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. And thanks very much to all of our presenters with us by teleconference or here in person. Certainly, this is an interesting subject this afternoon. I think that practically everyone you're looking at sitting around this table spends quite a bit of time in the air. So it's something that has certainly crossed my mind many times. And as recently as Thanksgiving weekend, when I was flying home after my week here, I could not believe the number of pets that were on that plane. And it's not usual that I see that, but that day, whether there are a lot of people going for Thanksgiving with families and were taking their pets along or what the reasons were, but there were several pets on that plane. And it crossed my mind several times. I'm glad it's me and not my sister, because she is very highly allergic to cats. And so it's an interesting conversation we're having here as to what her recourse would have been had it been her, and she was seated on that plane, and actually one of the cats was sitting in the seat right in front of me, so it was very, very, close proximity. So what I'm hearing is that really the person who has the allergy does not have a lot of recourse unless there is a unless there is a place they can move to that's maybe not in quite as close proximity. But as far as changing tickets and then disrupting their plans too, and I'm not so sure that that's totally fair to do. Would anybody like to comment on passenger availability of choices?
Well, I would say that because we only have 2 carriers in the country, or mainly 2 carriers, doing, I think someone just said 90% of the airline business is done through WestJet or Air Canada, and the fact that Dr. Schellenberg said it's a big country, I think that does pose an extra challenge here, because consumers don't have a lot of choice. And I think as everyone has said, we need to have some kind of procedures put in place to reduce risk and improve advance knowledge of whether there's a pet on board or not. I think that's really crucial, and will take some planning.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would echo that, and that from a lot of areas in the country, including Jill from Saskatchewan, there's very limited choices in terms of flights where you're going, and so it'd be great inconvenience if you're going to be hours later by having to take another flight if you don't have that information ahead of time. The other point I'd like to just raise, though, is that we shouldn't base opinions and decisions on the degree of complaints to the transportation agency, because I think they're just hearing the tip of the iceberg. Those of us on the front lines hear daily complaints in regard to this, and most of those people will never carry it forth to any regulatory agency. So I think it's very important to really consider the prevalence of this problem, because all of us have family members or friends who are allergic to cats and dogs.
I think that's a very good point. I'd like to ask Ms. Bergeron, thank you very much for your presentation, and certainly I think that what you've told us is of great importance, and I was glad to hear that all of the rest of the presenters agreed that there was a huge difference between a service animal and a pet. And as far as restrictions go, that there should be a distinction along those lines too. But I just have one question, and I hope that I don't appear to be disrespectful, but one thing that has been asked to me several times is why do you need the service animal right next to you? If you're on an airplane, would there not be an attendant that could help you if you had to move, if you had to get up and walk, say, to the bathroom or something like that?
That's a very good question. One of the things that, when it comes to travel, I traveled here independently, and there's a team building exercise that a lot of people do, and I don't know if you've ever had the chance to do it, where you're blindfolded and you have somebody guide you around. And the game is to build trust. And most people realize that as they're walking, they don't have trust with even sometimes people that they're married to or related to. And so it helps to build the trust factor. If I'm traveling independently by myself and I'm walking through an unfamiliar airport and having to put my dog in the cargo hold, putting the dog's situation aside just for myself, I am now putting my own health and safety in the at risk and having to trust somebody that I've never met, just some stranger working for the airlines that's going to walk me through, get me on a plane. And then if something happens and the people, we have to get off the plane in an emergency, I'm required to wait until somebody can come and get me. With my dog, I can get to the plane, get on the plane, I can go to the bathroom, I can function independently. And when the doors open and I can get off the plane, I can walk off the plane just like everybody else and go through the airport. In many situations, I don't even wait for passengers' assistance. I just go. I follow. I tell my dog, follow, and he follows the crowd all the way out of the airport. And so it gives me independence, freedom. It gives me an increased quality of life. But the main factor, too, for me is if my dog goes in cargo, which is undeniably for an animal that is used to being at my feet, by my bed, in my office, under my desk, at all times beside me, is going to have some kind of stress factor. And I have discussed this with my vet because last year I went to London and there was the question of whether the dog could travel in the cargo hold. And my vet said, well, he could travel in the cargo hold if he was heavily medicated. And it would take him a minimum of 24 to 48 hours for the medication to be sufficiently out of his system at the other end in order for him to work in a safe manner. So that would mean that getting to the airport at the other end, I could not just throw the harness on the dog and get out of the airport, and for the next 2 days I would be restricted as to what I could do unless I had somebody with me to walk me around. But even at that point, again, if it's somebody I don't know, then I'm trusting somebody. And you know, I love my family, but the majority of my family, when they guide me, they walk me into things and trip me over things, and because they're not paying attention like my dog is. So it is a safety factor at both ends and on the plane.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. I think that should certainly answer any questions that anybody has. I think those are extremely valid reasons, and I'm certainly glad I did ask you that question. Ms. McDonald,
but I think go and ask another question, and then
oh, okay.
I'll take my
I'll
turn.
make it brief.
No, it's okay.
You had said that a blanket resolution would be difficult. Can you hear me?
I have an earpiece on, being on the corner, I can, yes?
Okay. And my question to you is, why would a blanket resolution be difficult? Why couldn't you just say no pets in airplane cabins?
Well, that's the very matter that's before the agency right now, with the complaints before it, whether or not pets should be allowed in aircraft cabins. From the 4 people who have filed, who have allergies and have filed that complaint, and that's exactly what we're hearing right now.
So you are going to make a ruling, or what is the process? You make a ruling on it, or
pardon?
You make a ruling on it, or you recommend to somebody, or what happens?
If the agency at the end of the day were to find that there is an obstacle to travel, and that, I mean, we do apply the law when we're going through any process and rendering a decision, but it will have to go through the steps to determine whether the people are indeed persons with disabilities, whether or not they encountered an obstacle, whether or not that obstacle is undue, meaning can the carrier remove that obstacle without undue hardship, and if so, then it will order corrective measures. So it is sort of a sequential process that the agency takes through.
So if the allergy is not deemed to be a disability, there's nothing you can do?
That's correct, because they would not be deemed to be a person with a disability for the purposes of our Act.
So
if
who
they
can
are,
do something
pardon?
then? Who can do something then?
In terms of, well, I guess
banning pets.
I guess that's one of the things that this committee is looking at today. But if the agency does determine that a person with an allergy has an impairment and they are facing a activity restriction in the context of travel, so in the case of it, and I guess I know I'm sort of sounding a little bureaucratic here.
Yeah, you are.
But the issue really is that you're dealing with a wide spectrum of allergies. So the very first step is determining really what is that allergy about, what is the impact on the person, and what is the impact in relation to travel. And if indeed those line up, then the agency will make the finding that there's a person with a disability, and it'll go on to look at the next steps. If there's an undue obstacle, how does it get removed? Okay. So I can't tell you where we're going to end up, because we're in the early stages weighing all that evidence right now.
Is there an expected time frame?
These types of issues can be very, very complex. They're not clear cut. The answer's not always twofold, because we'll be looking at a myriad of evidence. Some of the work that we've done to date in some of the other allergy cases are not about pets, but we're a bit further along. We're looking at such issues as the circulation in an aircraft cabin. We're looking at some of the specialist reports that have been tabled with the agency. So there's a lot of pieces to pull together as the agency weighs the evidence.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Is it all right with the committee if I take my 7 minutes from here, and Christine will keep the time and let me know with some flexibility? I'm really glad we're having this session, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to present to us. I especially want to thank the Lung Association for actually starting this whole process, and starting with letters to all of us and making us aware of the issues. Since you spoke out, the Canadian Medical Association has also joined this project of trying to get back to the days when at least one Canadian airline was pet-free. I want to start with the question of, to any of you, in terms of what happened this year, because we in fact had an airline up until sometime in 2009, Air Canada, that did not allow pets. And they made that decision in 2006. I imagine they made that decision because they were made aware of problems in terms of allergies and problems for people with breathing problems. What is that your understanding? Have any of you got a background in terms of Air Canada, or could the CTC folks tell us anything in terms of what caused that reversal? Did people complain that they had a human right to bring their pets on planes, and therefore the Canadian Transport Agency looked at the evidence and decided that their human rights were more important than people with allergies, or was that just Air Canada's decision?
I can point to a decision that the agency had before it shortly after Air Canada decided to discontinue its Pets in Cabin program. And we had a complaint from someone who wanted to travel with their pets and found that this new change in policy was unreasonable. The reasons that Air Canada gave to the agency for that change was that they did have complaints about persons with allergies. They also had complaints from other travelers just about the sort of nuisance factor of having dogs in the cabin, so that largely feedback that they had received from their travelers, and that was their decision. You'd be best, I think, to ask Air Canada as to why they have
You're right.
changed
We
it
need to
again.
ask Air Canada, and we're hoping at some point Air Canada and WestJet and what's the other airline will be able, Boeing will be able to come to this committee before we conclude our study. But it sounds to me like Air Canada jumped when people complained and they were afraid of losing dollars and a threat to their profit base. And yet when people have written and complained, we get the kind of answer that says, which is quite offensive, I think, for most people, when they say, I'm sorry to hear that you were ill on your latest flight and you're dissatisfied with the response, but that's too bad. And I think everyone's looking for, if Air Canada can't bring forward a more responsible position, then, and your agency can't, and it sounds like what you have to go through is, get a doctor's certificate to prove that you've got a certain kind of disability. You've got to justify there's an obstacle on an airline that will aggravate that disability, and so on. I mean, it doesn't sound like to me that there's much hope going that route, and maybe what we have to do is bring in a law or do something in Parliament to make this happen. So I want to ask folks, what's the best we should aim for? And I know we've got to deal with the issue of guide dogs, and I know that's important. But first, in terms of the broad policy, do we go for a complete ban? Is that the ideal, notwithstanding the question of guide dogs? Secondly, or do we go towards WestJet approach of having certain flights designated? Well, I don't think they do that, but one idea is that certain flights get designated pet-free and others don't. Or we just let airlines decide, to keep the seats apart, and that'll be good enough. I'd like to hear from each of your organizations what's the best approach.
So Madam Vice Chair, given that the pet allergen is going to linger, especially on the seats, even if there isn't a pet on that particular flight, and given that there aren't that many service animals on flights in Canada, really the best case scenario would be a complete ban on the flight except for service animals.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I agree. The argument I had in a letter back from the CEO of Air Canada was that other international airlines allowed them and therefore they had to. Well, it turns out the largest one, British Airways, does not allow it, and so I think that's a spurious argument, and I think optimally still a ban aside from service animals is the ideal.
I would agree with that, and in addition to British Airways, we can also look at Cathay and Southwestern Airlines, who also don't allow pets on board. So we would ask for a complete ban, as well as a notification to passengers if a service animal is on board a flight. And I will note that it's disappointing that the airlines aren't here today to clarify the policy and the rationale for this decision. And we've been asking for a dialogue, and we hope we have that opportunity.
Thanks. Mary Ellen, and then I'll go to Jill.
Allergy Asthma Information Association members would agree a complete ban would be the ideal, with the exception for service animals.
Jill, and then I'm going to ask Diane a question. Jill?
Hi, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I definitely agree with the panel that a ban of all animals in the air cabinet other than service dogs would be ideal. I also want to point out something that hasn't been brought up today. Not all people have been diagnosed with asthma and their allergies yet. So you look at people, young children, for example, that the first time exposed to peanut allergies, they don't know they have that reaction yet. So it'd be quite terrible to have a young child have their first asthma attack in an airplane because of a dog or cat or animal in the aircraft. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Good point. Diane, can I ask you if the committee ended up recommending a complete ban of pets on planes except in cases where guide dogs are essential, and with the proviso that notice be given to other passengers? Would that be acceptable in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's important that everybody work together. I mean, even today having, sorry, I can't remember the lady's name on video camera.
Jill.
Jill. Even with Jill and I coming here today, we had to compromise, and we each, we worked with Christine to come up with a solution that would work for both of us. And I think it's important that we do that we work together and come up with a way. I won't tell you that every person with a guide or service animal identifies in advance. It is recommended that they identify in advance that they have a service dog or guide dog that they're using for their mobility, and I typically do. Although in other situations, I know when I call taxis, I never tell them that I have a guide dog or I'd never get a cab. So in this situation, I think that it can be absolutely, it's very different when you're on the ground and you can open a door, open a window, step out of the vehicle, get some fresh air, get something different. It's very different when you're at 40,000 feet. And I think that the disability community that uses guide and service dogs need to cooperate as well and make that advance notice.
Thank you, Diane. My time is way up. So now let me go to Joyce Murray.
Well, thank you for being here. I apologize that I've missed much of the presentation. We're dealing with a very important motion on H1N1 and our attempts to get the resources that we believe the provinces and health authorities need to do their job and get the mass vaccinations done. I'm very interested in this issue, as some of you know. The question I have is, the Lung Association released information that I believe 80% of Canadians feel that pet-free flights should be offered. Has
industry been briefed on that? What was their response? And to what degree have you worked together with industry to find a solution?
Yeah, we have briefed industry, and we've placed numerous calls, written letters to both the airlines. WestJet has expressed interest in having a discussion with us. We haven't heard anything from Air Canada. So, I mean, we've been pursuing open dialogue and collaboration on the issue, but at this point, we haven't managed to solidify any discussion.
Is there any other organizations that have had dialogue with the airline industry?
Well, I had dialogue with a number of the executive vice presidents of Air Canada at actually a reception they had in Vancouver. I thought I'd better go and try to make some contact. One of whom actually was allergic to cats, interestingly, but he was in another area of the industry and basically never took planes, so he wasn't exposed. Most of the others didn't really give me a response, I must admit. And my letter to the CEO came back with platitudes, basically saying, others all do it, so we're obligated to do it, which I didn't accept, as I mentioned. Others don't all do it. But thank you.
Well, I have some experience having been a provincial environment minister in being in the middle of difficult issues that have advocates on opposite sides of an issue. And I used to often find that there was there appeared to be no middle. There appeared to be no kind of third door. There was one door or the other door, and there. But when required to sit down and find a way, a third door often was figured out. So, what would be an ideal, in your view, process for the advocates for pet-free flights and the industry to actually get together, and so that everyone that needs to be at the table is at the table and find a way forward?
Well, I would ask for a subsequent meeting and to have the airlines present, because I mean, in the absence of having any representation from the airline, you know, there may be a solution that's not obvious to us that we're missing. And I think you're right. When parties are forced to come together to come up with solutions, there may often be a third door that opens that may not be apparent to us. So we would be more than willing to sit down and hammer out a solution.
So who do you see initiating an invitation like that? I don't think that necessarily a committee meeting like this is where solutions can be hashed out, but a meeting amongst the parties, a mediated meeting, who can initiate a process like that?
If I may, the agency does offer mediation services. We are in the midst of these judicial proceedings vis-a-vis the 4 allergy complaints we have before us. But that doesn't mean that they can't come off that track and go to mediation, but it does require all the parties being willing, and that has not been the case so far. But it's not to say that perhaps it's still could be a possibility. But again, you know, a request can be made. We can turn to the carriers and offer that, but in order for it to for us to mediate, we need agreement of the parties to do so. But we'd certainly be willing to try that if indeed it's an option we could pursue.
Oh, time is up. I'm sorry. Captain McLeod.
Madam Chair, and again, I would also like to thank all our witnesses today for some, you know, very excellent presentations, and you know, you've certainly put your perspective very clearly to us. I guess the first thing I'd have to say is when I heard that the airlines were opening up this pets in the cabin policy, I was actually quite stunned, and you know, immediately it was allergic reactions that certainly came to my mind. And I can't believe that it's not an actual huge risk management issue for them if, someone ever does, if a acute asthmatic reaction gets triggered on a flight due to a nearby pet, it has to be a huge risk management issue. And but I guess that's something, that the airlines must have considered. So to me, it's fairly clear that the safety of the traveling public should be a huge concern and priority. The thing I would like to ask, because I appreciate people want their pets to be able to travel safely, and I guess this would have to go to the Canadian Transportation Agency, and ultimately I will certainly want to ask the same question to the airlines, but what were the issues with the pets traveling in the cargo hold, and were those easily overcome issues? You said you had a few complaints in that area.
Those complaints largely related to, there was the size of the animals. For example, Air Canada cuts off at 70 pounds for both the animal and the carrier, and then the animal has to get shipped by cargo. There's problems in that not necessarily, your animal may not be on the same plane as you. It could go on a different plane. It could come a day or two later. We heard another complaint about a medium-sized animal where they discontinued allowing such animals in the baggage compartment, meaning you could have your dog go as a checked baggage because they were putting everything to cargo. The agency ruled in that particular case that tariff was unreasonable. We try to balance the rights of passengers to a reasonable tariff with the carrier's commercial, statutory, and other operational obligations. So it's been kind of a variety of types of cases, but we certainly have heard problems with the stress that animals will undergo in being in the belly hold of an airplane.
Well, certainly I know that you go to Spruce Meadows and you have these beautiful multi-million-dollar horses who travel in the belly of airplanes and then compete, and so anyway, I guess to me, over the years, how many complaints did you deal with regarding pets and travel issues? Not
a lot. In terms of probably, I would say maybe 4 or 5. Not a lot.
So that's over a whole lot of years, and
yeah.
You've had 4 regarding allergies in a much lesser time.
We did have some complaints, allergy complaints related to Air Canada back before they changed their policy in 2006 to discontinue. Those individuals withdrew their complaints. When Air Canada reinstituted its policy, then it wasn't very long after that we started receiving complaints again.
So I guess the other question would be for you, perhaps, to the Lung Association and some of the other witnesses here, if some of the people they work with, if they have the time and energy, is there value for a whole lot more complaints to be coming your way in terms of you making decisions?
There's that possibility. Generally, what we'll do is, if the complaints are the like matter, there's a couple things we could join them, or we'll stay those because we're dealing with the issue, and once a decision is issued, the direction is given. So the other complaints can be readily dealt with after that. So it really does depend, but quite often we'll just put the others in abeyance and hear the main cases so as to not slow down the process.
And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to wrap up. But let me just see if Jill had anything she wanted to add, because it's awfully hard being here on long distance and not part of this. Go ahead.
No, at this point, I just strongly agree with what the panel has said, and just want to take this opportunity again to thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I had one quick question. Who stopped smoking on airplanes? Was it the government or the agency or the airlines?
It was not the agency.
So, okay. Well, we'll look into that. Have any of you thought about taking this matter to the Human Rights Commission? the right to breathe free, clean air seems to me a human rights issue. Anyway, rhetorical question to think about. We, as a committee, we have talked about having another session. The unfortunate part is that we may not be able to do it until the new year, which means we're going to have to go through the holiday season with this issue over our heads and people dealing with it. But we thank you very much for opening up the whole discussion and for bringing it to our attention. We will complete this discussion by bringing you back with the airlines and then doing a report to Parliament. So thank you very, very much for your time. And the meeting is temporarily adjourned for a minute.
can read this here for students.
Pursuant to Standing Order 108, Sub 2, and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, August 12, 2009, study of H1N1 preparedness and response. I would like to welcome our witnesses today to talk with us and bring us up to speed about the situation with H1N1. So who would like to start? Dr. Butler-Jones?
Much, and I know the topic, the key question that you're all asking is which watches I'm wearing today, and it's my Hong Kong $10 Mickey Mouse, as opposed to my backwards Goofy or whatever. So, anyways, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to provide a brief situation update. Over the past 2 weeks, there has been a considerable increase in the numbers of hospitalizations and deaths. While this trend is increasing, it's still lower than the peak period of the first wave, for example, the first 3 weeks of June of 2009. Since October 29th, 175 new hospitalizations and 6 new deaths were reported. Since the outbreak began, we've seen a total of almost 1,800 hospitalized cases, of which 351 were in intensive care and 101 have died, unfortunately. While there may be many things we know about this virus, the future still remains a bit uncertain. We have a comprehensive approach. Ultimately, vaccine will be our best defense, and there should be enough for everyone who wants it by Christmas. We also have national, provincial, and local plans. We have sufficient stock of antivirals to treat all that need it, and backup supplies to support provinces and territories if needed. This is thanks to a great deal of foresight from governments over many years. Canada's agreement for the domestic production of pandemic vaccine dates back to 2001. And Canada entered into that contract to ensure capacity in Canada so that it was capable of meeting our needs for a large supply of vaccine produced domestically in a limited time frame. And it had the company had an established track record in producing seasonal flu vaccine as well. And this agreement was secured Canada's supply of H1 vaccine for all Canadians who need and want protection. Other countries did not have such agreements in place, and as a result have had to buy multiple vaccine products from multiple suppliers, each with different indications. And it turns out, while we would all hope for more, Canada actually has the most secure and complete supply of vaccine in the world, with a higher percentage of our population now in the process of being immunized than just about any other country. Before we move on, I'd just like to clarify something that was said yesterday in terms of the relationship of the domestic supply. From a domestic vaccine security perspective, GSK is devoting its entire domestic production capacity for producing and bottling vaccine to filling the Canadian order. The manufacturer cannot export finished pandemic vaccine in vials to any other customer, and it has not done so. The certainty and stability of supply from GSK has meant that, unlike other countries, Canada did not have to scramble to find a supplier. GSK has produced more antigen than it can bottle in Canada. Soyez assurés qu'il aura assez de vaccins.
Please be assured there will be enough vaccination for the entire population.
And long hours, public health officials, healthcare workers, individuals and governments at all levels are putting in across the country. This is no easy task. In under 2 weeks, we have had as many Canadians immunized as we would normally do in some 2 months. Rest assured, there will be, at the end of the day, enough vaccine for all. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Dr. Butler-Jones. And Ms. Woods?
Sure. Do I have to turn this on? I'll just be very brief in my remarks, just to let you know what the state of play is with First Nations communities. Based on Flu Watch, as of October 24th, we are seeing increased levels of influenza-like illness in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, and Newfoundland. Overall, the levels of influenza-like illness in First Nation communities are following a similar pattern to the pattern observed in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan. Most of the cases for on-reserve First Nations continue to be mild, and we, of course, will continue to monitor the activity that we see in the community nursing stations. The immunization program is well underway. Some of the clinics started as of October 26th. This, of course, depended on supply of vaccine from the provinces and the provincial sequencing. But I'm happy to say in the first few days of the vaccine rollout, mass clinics were held in over 135 First Nation communities. And we're happy to report that, for example, in the case of Alberta in our region, the clinics have been held in all 44 First Nation communities. They had administered 22,000 doses of vaccine as of late last week, and I know from talking to my regional colleagues today, it's even more now. We're very happy to see also that the response to the clinics has been very positive and that the clinics are generally very well attended. Community leadership has been absolutely invaluable in this. Volunteers, of course, are visible, supporting mass immunization efforts, not excluding people from Health Canada who've gone out to 3 of the regions to help. Our health professionals have gone out to help their colleagues in the regions. And despite delays in the rollout of some clinics, we're still looking towards our original timelines of having clinics complete their first round of vaccines, this is all of them, by mid to late November, and we hope to be able to finish up required second doses in December. We will continue to keep community members updated regarding vaccine rollout because I know that you're interested in it, but so far we're very happy with what's happened. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Chatini, do you have a presentation as well?
No, I don't have a presentation per se. I just normally update on some of our activities week to week. And so all I wanted to say this week is that we have successfully delivered to 10 million Canadian households our direct mail pamphlet, which was providing important information on symptoms, on what to do if you're sick. It also talked about our preparedness guide. We received in a 5-6-day period at 1-800-O-Canada, Service Canada, well over 27,000 calls from Canadians requesting the guide. Because of the interest of the guide through the ordering at 1-800-O-Canada and being picked up at Canada Post outlets across the country, we've had to go back and reprint 2 million more guides. So that will be a total of 3.2 million preparedness guides that will have been produced by the agency and distributed. So I think that clearly we're reaching millions of Canadians. I've over the weeks have updated on the number of hits to our website. We're seeing since April on H1N1 alone more than 4 million visits by Canadians looking for information on H1N1 on our site. And we have produced multiple fact sheets for at-risk groups. We have more information on symptoms, what to look for, and of course all of the links to all the provinces and territories so that Canadians can be informed about activities across the country, not only in their own jurisdiction. So that's all I wanted to update today on our activities. And of course, we will be providing you an update of the document that we tabled last week, which just gives you more statistics in terms of all of our communications outreach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm back. And I want to thank the Vice Chairs, Ms. Murray and Ms. Washley-Solis, for so kindly filling the chair for a while for me. I would now, we're going to go into the first round. We're going to do 7 minutes, questions and answers, and we will start with Dr. Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my first question is for Sheila Jane, and that I just was, even though that you sent the vaccines to the provinces and are now counting on the provinces to get them to the remote and isolated communities, is that correct? But I guess I'm hearing today that in Northern Ontario they've received about half of what they expected and no pediatric needles, so that they're having to immunize babies and children with adult needles.
I can answer part of it, not all of it, Dr. Bennett. We don't rely on the provinces to get supplies and the vaccines to the remote clinics. We rely on our own supply chain. And we're following the same route that we follow with seasonal vaccine. So in most cases, there hasn't been an interruption. I know there was an unfortunate case in Ontario where one small shipment of vaccine froze, but ordinarily it isn't a problem. could you remind me again that I don't know anything about the pediatric needles, but of course we would look into that right away. I do know that there was what appeared to be a shortage yesterday in some of the communities in Northern Ontario, but we do know that there was another 4,300 additional doses in Sioux Lookout that were to be sent out today to the various communities. So I think we're okay on that one, and we will look into the question of the pediatric needles.
Okay. And I guess, Elaine, if on the, I just wondered whether all members of Parliament had received a copy of the brochure.
I'll check with our parliamentary affairs. I know that we had provided some PDF files, so I'll backtrack on that and find out with our parliamentary affairs. And I'll ask them to get back to you on that.
They were sent to all MPs and senators.
Okay, so Marla confirms that they were sent to all MPs and senators.
I think on the debate on Monday night, there was a concern that because still members of Parliament never got the camera-ready art to do we were just referred to the website to actually send out 10%ers, that never happened. So it seems that only, that it was a problem in terms of us being able to help.
I think perhaps we're talking about two different products. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding you.
Oh, no, it's two different products for sure.
Okay.
It's just all summer, I think, that we were offering to use 10%ers to be able to to get the camera-ready art that we would send out, but that didn't happen. So, and in terms of the emergency guide, was that sent to members of Parliament?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question, please?
Was the emergency guide sent to members of Parliament?
Preparedness guide?
Yeah.
But that's what was sent. That's what was sent.
And was there any sent to constituency offices, like, box them or anything? No.
Not specifically to constituency offices, no. I'm sorry, I think...
If they requested them.
Oh, well, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I just think maybe people would feel a bit better, particularly in this constituency offices, to actually have the hard copy there to refer to. I think they're getting a lot of questions, and that if people wanted to come down there instead of the post office, that maybe that would make us feel a little bit better provided. And anyway, I'll stop there. I did want to ask David about that in the 2004 pandemic preparedness plan, it articulated that there would be at least 2 suppliers when in purchasing the vaccines, and I just wondered why the 2006 plan changed.
We've only ever had the one contract for pandemic vaccine. That's with what is now GSK, previously Shire and ID Biomedical. There's never been another contractor. There was never someone else who was available to produce the vaccine domestically. There still isn't.
I guess the feeling was that when it comes time to purchase the vaccine, there was, in the 2004, an articulation of why it would be important to buy from 2 companies. And in the contract, I believe it does say you can buy from another company. Anyway, I'll give over to Joyce Murray because she's got a specific Olympic question.
Thank you. About 3 weeks ago, I spoke with the medical health officer responsible for a quarter of BC's population and for the Olympic plan for preparedness for H1N1. And she said that the plan was in place, good plan, but no funding for it. And Dr. Butler-Jones, I had asked you at a previous committee member, is there funding to assist in delivering inoculations? And you had said resources won't be a problem. But that certainly 3 weeks ago was not the experience of the people in charge in British Columbia, who were concerned about the $20 to $30 million to actually deliver mass vaccination to 70% of the public. So has anything changed in the 3 weeks since I heard that expression of concern that the mass vaccinations simply, there was no funding for them in the health authority and they weren't sure how they were going to do it?
I guess there's two things. One is the question that you did ask me was with regards to antivirals for the Olympics and additional antivirals, and there was no shortage of antivirals. We have abundant in the national stockpile. The province chose to buy some additional rather than accessing the national stockpile. In terms of all the provinces and territories are providing immunizations. That's in all cases. We have committed to with the provinces and territories, depending on how things evolve, to have that conversation after the fact as to what's needed. In the meantime, everybody's using whoever they have, and we don't have anybody else in the drawer to pull out.
Has there ever been a mass? Dr. Jones, and we'll now go to Monsieur Defer. Thank you, Ms. Murray.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the witnesses. Mr. Butler-Jones, how many vaccinations have the government given, and how many do they have in their possession?
By jurisdiction, I'll give you a few examples. For example, NWT has already, and Yukon have each immunized approximately half their population. Nunavut has started and will have, they expect all the clinics completed in all the remote communities by the end of next week. They were planning on a 2-week campaign. In British Columbia, they don't have specific numbers, but they anticipate, as do most jurisdictions, by the end of this week, the vaccine that they currently have in their hands, they will be able to deliver that. So either the end of this week or early next week, and then there'll be more vaccine coming. Pardon, en français peut-être?
French, perhaps?
4.5, 5 minutes to questions and answers, because the bells, I've just been informed, now are going to ring at 5:15. I want everyone to get a chance. So, Monsieur, go ahead, Monsieur Defer.
Okay.
And I'll give you that extra time, but I need to forewarn you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, the Liberals got 7 minutes to ask a question, and so... Okay. Mr. Butler-Jones, the big problem with respect to the scarcity of vaccines is because the government decided to change the type of vaccination. The government realized there was a problem because there was enough adjuvated vaccinations for pregnant women. How do you see this scarcity? When you look at what's happening now, the government is trying to use GSK as a scapegoat, but we know, and we've seen this, and we've talked about this during the emergency debate for hours, that it was due to a lack of preparation on the part of the government, and the GSK has to change all of its facilities in order to produce more quickly this unadjuvated vaccination. What do you think of that? This was a request that was made by provinces and territories. They wanted a vaccine for pregnant women. This was a recommendation made by WHO. But this recommendation was made a long time ago, Mr. Butler-Jones. We've known about this for a long time now. We found out about this in July. This was a change that was made. The company made a recommendation for Canada. The company said that it should produce unadjuvated vaccination for pregnant women. That was a request made by the provinces and the territories. And we negotiated this at the request. This was a request made by the provinces. That wasn't our choice. This was a choice made by the experts and the chief medical officers from the provinces and territories. But somewhere along the line, the government should have foreseen that there would be a problem. I do understand that the provinces did make this request. This was a legitimate request, but at the same time, for once, the federal government had an opportunity to show that it respected provincial jurisdictions, but could show some leadership in the area. And clearly, not having taken enough time to allow for the production of this unadjuvated vaccine, well, I just don't understand why. All of the companies throughout the world there has been more problems in the United States. Perhaps there are fewer than 30 million doses in the United States. So it's a problem that all countries are experiencing, all jurisdictions are experiencing. So it's a real challenge, and not just a challenge for Canada. Now, Canada is the best prepared of any country in the world. Do I still have a few minutes? Thank you, Madam Chair. I recognize you have a big heart. Thank you. Could you give us a date? When will we have completed these vaccinations? We are anticipating that if our projections are correct, that everything will be done before December 25th. Thank you.
Go to Ms. Wachelee-Solis. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I wish I would have been here for your speeches. Unfortunately, I was in the House on another H1N1 debate. Just a welcome to the committee again, and I was just wondering, with regards to the single source contract, I mean, you know, we need to look at what went wrong. I mean, there's tons of people out there that were waiting for the shots. Was there really an effective communication strategy put in place in order to deal with this, first of all? And second of all, is a single source contract, does that need to be rethought now and to prevent any future crisis like this one?
Okay. Certainly what was not anticipated even a few weeks ago was the level of interest. Nobody really anticipated. I mean, there's lots of experience with vaccination clinics. Did not expect the kinds of willingness to line up, etc., that was experienced. The provinces and territories have been planning for this for a long time. They were surprised by the level of interest, particularly when just a few weeks ago people were talking about we'd be lucky to get a third of the population willing to be immunized at all. That's the first reality. In terms of the single source contract, that is a contract that was put in place to ensure access and total amount of vaccine with domestic production for all Canadians. That actually has served us well. Countries with multiple contracts are not as well off as we are with a single source contract. That having been said, as we review all of the what we go through and when we look back at this and plan for the next pandemic, one of the things we will clearly be looking at is having a second smaller supplier. Again, the security issue because it's not produced in Canada, but at least having that as a possible option will be one of the things we'll be looking at.
But when you look at the review of what happened when SARS was there and how well publicized that was, and finally people were going to address the issue, that they were taking those steps in certainly more of a big population base was actually acting on taking steps to protect themselves. I still have a hard time believing we've been doing all this communication, telling people that people are dying here. Please go out and get vaccinated. And then we say, oh, yes, we're ready, and then all of a sudden we're not ready. So I'm just trying to get some sense as when did you actually know that there wasn't going to be enough medication? And did the fact that they switched from adjuvant to non-adjuvant, did they give you a heads up that this would actually slow down that other process?
The projections for the amount of vaccine that we would receive we were anticipating up until last week. We are anticipating that this week we would receive pretty close to what we've got in previous weeks. It's only basically last week that there was a hint, and we only actually knew the extent of it on Thursday.
Now, do you think that the whole how it gets distributed should actually be revisited, given the fact that people who are at high risk or actually were not able to get the vaccine or still not able to get the vaccine yet? So do you think that whole area on how everything gets dispersed, determined on who should get vaccine first and who shouldn't, should be revisited? We just have to look at the Aboriginal communities for one of them, and there's still Aboriginal communities out there that still don't have the amount of vaccines that they were promised.
The provinces and territories, local health authorities, all, based on the experience of the first week, all have adjusted their plans accordingly. That's the nature of it. What they saw, what they expected, they saw something different than they expected, and so they've adjusted their plans. And this week is going smoother, and next week will go smoother still.
But at the end of the day, Aboriginal communities were told they would actually get the vaccine first, and they would get enough for their whole communities. And then we see communities that still don't have that amount.
We don't have enough vaccine for the total population yet. We're rolling it out as it's available. That is important to protect as many people as possible. Somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population, depending on where you live, is now immunized. That is something which will continue to roll out. You can't do every community. For example, Nunavut is planning with all isolated communities. They've not all been visited yet, but over the next 2 weeks they will be. And so very shortly, all of the remote communities will be visited and will have their opportunities for a vaccine, but it can't be all done at once.
But don't you think
Thank
that...
you, Dr. Butler-Jones. We'll now go to Dr. Carey.
A year ago, what the virus was going to be, we could have had vaccine produced months ago. It wouldn't be an issue, like for seasonal flu. The reality is, we're living in very real time as the change of this to experience this virus, and it's like fighting a war. And you never know what the enemy is going to do next.
Thank you. Dr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Sorry, Dr. Butler-Jones. I don't have a lot of time here, but I wanted to take the opportunity, I know on behalf of the government members, that we would like to thank you and your agency for all the good work you have been doing. I don't think you were here last week, but I was actually in Washington, and they gave us an accolade of how well we're doing. So I did want to give you the opportunity to address some of the misinformation that is coming from the other place. We heard about people really emphasizing what went wrong. I think it's an opportunity to say what went right. The contract in 2001, I think if you'd like to emphasize how important it was to firm up the Canadian domestic supply, I think the facts speak for themselves. By that decision and moving forward to it, we have the #1 in the world as far as per capita vaccine availability. If you could address this idea of a shortage, I personally read in the Ottawa Citizen this week that they had 80,000 vaccines given. By the end of the week, they should have 100,000 by Friday. Durham region, where I come from, they had 93,000 doses Monday. They've only given 20,000. A colleague of mine from the Toronto area said they've only given 20,000 doses for some reason. Do you have any evidence or feedback from the provinces that they've come anywhere close to the 6,000 doses being administered?
Okay, I guess there are sort of two questions there, or comments. One, in terms of the 2001 contract, that's Canada's the only country in the world that had such a contract at that time and at the onset of what we're doing now. It has proven itself. Could there be things that we do in the future to improve things further? Yes, obviously we will be looking at that. But it, I think, is a credit to successive governments that we have had the level of preparation in place in Canada that puts us in a position that we are. In terms of the distribution of vaccine, the provinces and territories, again, the Northern Territories received all of their allotment because of their remoteness and needing to go community by community. In terms of the provinces themselves, again, it varies depending on the province. They focused where their view was in terms of getting the job done most effectively, and most of them are saying that by the end of this week, early next week, the vaccine that they've received to this point, they will be given, and then there'll be additional vaccine, larger amounts of vaccine next week, and even more ongoing.
So as of this date, there's no evidence that they've given all that we have distributed to the provinces?
No, not all the immunizations have been given, but they anticipate over the next week or so that that should be complete, so, and then they'll be looking forward to the next doses.
So we're looking to be on track with the rollout, the capacity that they can be delivered at the front lines. Everything is going.
Yeah, they've had to adjust again because some were a little more focused. Some provinces were very focused on the high risk groups and starting there. Others were a little less focused, and as a result have changed that, and all are now focusing on the highest risk groups to ensure that they have access first. And in fact, the 6 million doses that are out there, plus what comes this week and next week, would be enough to actually cover all of the high risk groups.
Thank you very much. There's been some criticism on the order date in August. when the government made the order, there were some statements that we should have done it sooner. With the contract that was signed, did it really matter when that date, when the order was put in?
No, it actually in effect, the order was made in 2001 for up to 60 million doses for Canadians, all the first bottled vaccine until we met whatever doses we required would come off that and be available to Canada before they could export bottled vaccine elsewhere in the world. And so it didn't matter. We needed to make sure that we were confident with the number, because basically it's the provinces and territories that are delivering it, to get their confidence. But whether we'd ordered it in May, in April, a year ago, or 2 years from now, actually 2 years from now wouldn't work because it's already being produced. But the point being is that getting the number did not make any difference to our access to vaccine or when we'd receive it.
Well, I do want to thank you for going through those important facts, because it seems that the misinformation, no matter how often you repeat it, the misinformation that's out there, maybe it makes better headlines or maybe better politics.
Thank you, Dr.
But
Carey.
I want to thank you for the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Dr. Carey, but I'm going to have to put this to a closure now. I want to thank you very much for coming today, Dr. Butler-Jones and Elaine Chatanet, and of course, Ms. Sheila Jane Woods. We really appreciate that. I have 3 things that I have to bring before committee before the bells ring. The bells are going to ring in about 3 minutes, so if everyone would be so kind to just leave the room. And I want to thank you for your presentations today. So we'll suspend for about 1 minute.